What's up, guys? It's Toad back with you yet again, as usual, Monday morning. I'm testing my audio again at the start of every one of these videos now because of my stupid audio issues that have been happening. But I think we're good. I mean, I double checked my inputs or whatever. It sounds like we're good. So let's go here. Hang on a second. Let me bring up the game center here. Yeah, there we go. All right. Well, actually, first I should recap yesterday, right, where I was 2-3, and I should have at least been 3-2. I'm going to rant about this. If you guys saw what my plays were yesterday, and saw the one play that obviously should not have been a loss for me, yet it was. I mean, I could bring it up on my screen shortly here, but I will just recap every game quickly. I mean, I lost in hockey in the New York Rangers. I know I faded the market read on that when the Rangers put themselves in a 2-0 hole, and they just couldn't get out of it, and that was pretty much it. I think they did outplay who were they playing again? I don't even remember who they were playing, but the Blues. I think they outplayed them a little bit statistically in the game. But of course, when you're losing the game, you're going to wind up having more shots than your opponent. But the Rangers were the more physical team in the game. If you look at the number of hits and whatever, they won the face-off percentage as well. So they kind of had the possession edge in the game. They still didn't win. So that sucked. The NBA game just didn't get there. I mean, the Spurs had a bad shooting game, and they just put themselves in a hole. They had a lot of turnovers, too. So just bad stuff going on. A little bit unpredictable in that game, man. You don't typically expect the home team is going to have that much of a turnover disadvantage and just a really off shooting game as well for them. So that just sucked. They put themselves in a big hole, and they did make a comeback, and they were within the spread later in the game, but then fell apart again. And then, of course, I won on the San Francisco Dons in college basketball. So that was a pretty easy winner on that one. Good call by me. Easy win on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the NFL as well. And that, I don't know how the score wound up being that much of a blowout. I stopped paying attention to the game, but I was like, oh, geez, all right. Well, whatever. I haven't really looked into that one. But, of course, I'm going to look into the Broncos versus the Colts. Let's take a look at this game, shall we? And see why I'm absolutely pissed off right now. Yeah, well, I mean, what else is new, really? But this is ridiculous, man. 31-13 was the final. So you think, yeah, Toad, you're an idiot. The Broncos destroyed the Colts. Yeah, did they actually, though? Look at the stats in this game. Denver, 193 yards of offense is what they were held to. 13 first downs. Indy outgained them by over 100 yards, out first down them, and outpossessed them in the game, and yet they lost 31-13. Well, how the hell did that happen? Well, you can kind of see here on the game recap here what's going on here. 5 turnovers on the side of Indy here. I mean, and it was worse than that even would make it look, because it's like, oh, well, they were -2 in turnovers because Denver had a bunch of turnovers too. Yeah, but if you saw the game and how the game flow went, it was ridiculous, man. Indy, I believe, this is a point when they had the lead. I think they were either down 17-13 or they were winning 13-10. And Jonathan Taylor he blew by everybody. He had a touchdown, basically, ran into the end zone. And what did he do? Which is becoming an epidemic in the NFL, because we saw somebody, I think Jamar Chase, maybe somebody on Cincinnati did this yesterday too. And if it was Jamar Chase and Jonathan Taylor doing this, then you have like some of the elite players in the NFL doing this, which is just ridiculous. And it comes down to like coaching, discipline. I mean, this is bad. It tells you these coaches of these teams fucking suck. But I'm still going to complain about it because Jonathan Taylor was an inch away from being in the end zone. And what does he do? Tosses the ball away like he's already crossed the goal line. And that counts as a fumble through the end zone. So not only is it not a touchdown for Indy, which, by the way, that rule is absolute bullshit. Complete bullshit rule. You should not lose possession when you're an inch away just because you drop the football through the end zone. It should be like whatever. Like maybe I think what would be fair would maybe be like back you up 10 yards, 10-yard penalty, and you maybe you lose the down, maintain possession, whatever, something like that. It's just absolutely ridiculous, because that would have been a touchdown to either put them back ahead or extend their lead. I forget which. And then once that happened, the whole game unraveled. And then if you saw the highlights from it, I believe it was still a 17-13 lead for Denver. And this was later into the game. I think this is almost was getting into the second half. It was still like 17-13. And Indy made this play call that I mean, they're trying to, I guess, catch Denver off guard. I don't know what the hell this was where I think Richardson lateraled it out to one of their wide receivers. I don't even know exactly what it was. I don't know who it was. Then the receiver was trying to, I guess, lateral it back to Richardson. And that lateral got picked off and run all the way back the other way. And they were past midfield, I think, or somewhere around midfield when this happened. That gets run back the other way for either a pick six or a fumble six. I forget how it was even scored. And then all of a sudden, now it's 24-13. And it's basically like you're fucked at this point. So that game, statistically, there's no way I should have lost that fucking game. I didn't even need the Colts to win. I needed them to come within 4 points. This is such bullshit, dude. It's one of the most bullshit results, and I'm absolutely sick of it because the last, 4 or 5 weeks, the public is, still getting all of these games right, man. The public usually has their day in, October, during some of the bye weeks, and then usually the odds makers skew the lines further, and then the public starts really taking it on the chin, and that still isn't really happening. I mean, last week maybe they did a little bit, but these are some of the worst pick'em weeks that I've ever had. I was rolling in my pick'em pools this season, and now all of a sudden I've had a bunch of horrible weeks in a row. It's going to be another below 500 week. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And the late market read on the Detroit game yesterday was bad. Again, my initial instinct on that game was right. I had mentioned I liked Buffalo initially, and then the late market read had me questioning it when I did the show yesterday. I said, maybe I want to change my opinion on this. I should never have even done that. Just go with your initial instinct, man. My initial instinct is better than it's better more often than not, let's say. But I'm just sick of these bullshit results, man. I had that one. I had 2 that week where I had the Atlanta game where they completely dominated the Chargers statistically and turnovers totally threw that game away. And then I think the other loss that week was it also on the Colts? I don't even remember. I had 2 losses that week and they were both very similar on total bullshit, although the Atlanta one was a lot worse. But this one was really difficult to take, man, because I'm also a Colts fan and that was their last gasp, basically. So I expected a huge effort from them in the game, and they were playing well early in the game, and it looked pretty good early on. And then you are inches away from crossing the goal line and having a touchdown that's probably going to continue your momentum. And if Taylor gets in, they're probably going to wind up winning the game outright. And instead, it represents a complete momentum shift. When you fumble like that, it should not be a loss of possession, man. I am so fucking pissed. Let's move on to today. I'm done with it. We got a short card. I only have one play today, which is in college basketball. I don't even think these games are really even worth discussing for the most part. I mean, we do have Grand Canyon against Louisiana Tech. I mean, this is one of the more interesting games on the slate today because both of these teams are kind of pretty good mid-major teams, really. Grand Canyon coming off a loss to Georgia. That's a tough game, man. And it ended a long win streak for them. So that could have an effect of hanging them over, man. When you play tough as an underdog, they weren't a huge underdog, but 6.5 point underdog against an SEC team who only had 1 loss at the time. They might still be a 1-loss team. I don't know. That's still a tough game to be coming off of. Now they have to go on the road. First true road game out to Louisiana Tech. Not an easy task for Grand Canyon to have to do this. And La Tech, they've kind of regathered themselves a little bit. They had that loss to Memphis in there. They're really their only bad loss to Southern, but they haven't really faced a difficult schedule yet. Memphis, I mean, that's an excusable loss. They still played pretty well in that game. They bounced back and they've reeled off a couple of wins, but Grand Canyon is still the slightly better of these two teams, and they have the more difficult schedule so far. So that's kind of what gives me a little bit of hesitation. But as far as the spot, I think it's worse for Grand Canyon. I mean, Louisiana Tech's just kind of staying at home, coming off a couple of wins. So they have momentum right now, at least, which as long as they don't have too many days off, I don't know. I didn't check. Yeah, no, they don't. They only have a couple days off. So this seems to set up decently for La Tech in this one, but I'm not going to play it. This is not my actual play, but it's a game worth discussing at the very least. It might be a game worth watching. And Grand Canyon had that big effort against Georgia 2 days ago. So neither team on a lot of rest there. I did see, I mean, this line has flipped the early market move from Grand Canyon plus 1.5 over to a favorite of minus 1.5. So odds are telling you Grand Canyon is actually the better team, which I agree with, as they are favored on the road. But in this spot, I'm not going to be doing that. So I'll stay away. We do have Texas Tech, but this looks like a mismatch between them and Oral Roberts because Texas Tech, they're coming off a tough loss to Texas A&M, a big Texas rivalry against a ranked A&M team. I mean, that's a pretty big game they're coming off of, but do I want to try to come in and take points with this Oral Roberts team that is not that Oral Roberts team of a few years ago? No, I do not. So I just figured I would point out that spot, but I'm not going to be laying points with Texas Tech, obviously. And then UTEP is coming off a game where I won on UTEP. They hung really close with Louisville, so that's what they're coming off of. They played real well against Louisville, so they could be in a little bit of a hangover spot here, but the line looks like it's crept up a little bit from 15 with heavy juice to 15.5. Not a huge move there, but they're playing a pretty weak Tarleton State team that I think kind of played way above their depth last year. They were winning games they just should not have been winning. I talked about how they were massively overperforming last year when they were in the mix for trying to win the WAC last year. They're not a very good team. I think they're probably worse than they were last year, so I don't want to try to come in and take the points with Tarleton State there, but UTEP, I would say, is probably in a hangover spot because they took Louisville like right to the wire, and that was a bad spot for Louisville as well, which is why I went in and took the 15 points with UTEP in that one. So my college basketball is starting to kind of even out a little bit and be a little bit more smooth at the very least, but I know like yesterday was a slight loss again, so I'm still down on the year, and I need to somehow, I got to have some big days, man, to get back on the winning side. And today I'm being selective, so today is not going to be the day that happens. But today, what I do have is, what was I going to say? What's the game that I'm even on? Oh yeah, that's right. Middle Tennessee -4, although it looks like it's mostly -4.5 now. I mean, 4 is a little bit key in basketball, I guess, because it's 2-point buckets, but it's not a huge difference. So I'm going to come in and play Middle Tennessee in this one, even though I think maybe they're not in absolutely the greatest spot, but I think the spot for Cal Baptist is really bad. Cal Baptist is playing a third straight game on the road, or at least neutral site. I don't know if these are all true road games, but at least a third straight game away from home. And what are they coming off of? They're coming off of one of their biggest games of the year where they went into San Diego State, who's been playing well, is ranked. Cal Baptist was a 15.5-point underdog, actually down to a 13.5-point underdog in that game. They're an in-state little brother as well. So Cal Baptist really stepped up their game here. And they were out of the game, man. I think to an extent, San Diego State, I think, took their foot off the gas and thought the game was over. And then Cal Baptist crept all the way back into it to the point where they got to within 4 points in the final 2 minutes of the game. So I think that's going to serve to put them in a hangover spot after this, man. That was a big effort. They put in a big effort to come back against a far superior San Diego State team here. And San Diego State shot out of their minds too. And Cal Baptist still came back in this game. They also lost the turnover battle. They somehow won the rebound battle. So is that indicative that maybe San Diego State actually looked better in this game than they actually are? Maybe. But either way, I mean, that's a big effort, tough game for Cal Baptist to be coming off of. And looking at their schedule, I mean, this does not look easy to me for them. As they're now going from California over to Tennessee, to Murfreesboro, Tennessee, which is, I believe, an unfamiliar geographic location for them to be in. So they're having to travel out to Tennessee before they turn around and come right back to California and play Fresno, who I think they consider to also be an in-state big brother to them. So I think they could get caught, even though they probably know Middle Tennessee is pretty good and that they'll need to step it up for this game, but still. And they did already beat Fresno once in this crazy 2 overtime game, but still, I mean, Fresno is, I think maybe a game they might have more of a focus on just because it's a California game. And this is a weird travel spot, like I said, where they were in Orlando on December 1st, and they went all the way back to the Pacific Coast. They had a bunch of days off, but then they had this big game against San Diego State, like I said, and now with not that many days off after that, having to travel east again before they go back again to California, crisscrossing the country like this, going into an unfamiliar venue. I think it's bad for Cal Baptist. Middle Tennessee, they are the better team, as the odds makers are telling you. It's a 4.5-point line. And I think maybe it should be a little bit higher than this. Ken Palm, I think, has this at around 5. He's got Middle Tennessee as the much, much better defensive team. Cal Baptist is the slightly better offensive team, but the discrepancy on defense is much, much greater, and it's on the side of Middle Tennessee. So you're getting the better team with Middle Tennessee here. Middle Tennessee has also faced a more difficult schedule, and they play slightly faster than Cal Baptist likes to play. Cal Baptist is in like the bottom third as far as the tempo they like to run, and Middle Tennessee is more middle of the pack as far as tempo. So Middle Tennessee might be able to get this game up a little bit in pace and kind of throw Cal Baptist out of their element, because Cal Baptist wants to try to slow it down more than that. So that might be a little bit of an extra edge to Middle Tennessee as well, because you got the better team at home. They're probably going to be able to control the pace here. Middle Tennessee has been good this year, man. They spread out their scoring around. It looks like they have pretty balanced scoring from this team, which is pretty good. Their losses, if you look at them, are not that bad. I mean, Murray State is not that bad. Bradley is pretty good this year. And Belmont is the game they're coming off of. Yes, that's a tough game, as I alluded to. Middle Tennessee is coming off a pretty difficult game there against Belmont, but I don't think they're going to be in a hangover spot or anything like that. And they have extra time off. They've been off for 8 days now. And that game is not going to, this break, it's not going to be disruptive because they lost to Belmont going into the break. So I think the break is just going to help them. They're not really traveling at all. They're just staying in the state of Tennessee, which is also where Belmont is. So this is a much better rest spot and travel spot for Middle Tennessee, who is also the better team. So they got a number of edges in this game. And like I said, Middle Tennessee, when they've faced teams who are worse than they are, they've won every single one of those games. They've only lost when they played teams who are better than they are. And some of these wins are actually not unimpressive, man. Abilene Christian, I don't think is really that bad. Ohio in overtime, I think that's not unimpressive either. South Florida, that's a team from kind of a bigger conference in the American. And so is UAB. UAB is not that bad, and they beat them too. So Middle Tennessee has not been unimpressive, man. Middle Tennessee, they're in Conference USA? Yeah, so slightly lesser conference, I guess. But yeah, I like Middle Tennessee in this one. They do have an in-state battle up next against Lipscomb and then Tennessee, but I don't really care. I think they're going to want to bounce back, having all this time off, coming off a loss, even though it was to a pretty decent Belmont team. So give me Middle Tennessee, or I will lay the points with Middle Tennessee, -4. That's the play there. We'll move over to NHL. We have a few games here. The games are all actually pretty good games in the NHL. I'm not playing any of these, but we got Washington, Dallas is the first game up. Dallas down from -152 to -139. On the money line here, they are public with 93% of tickets, 98% of the cash. Probably not an accurate cash percentage, but it looks like Dallas is public, and the line is moving against them a little bit. I don't really have too much of a reason to necessarily disagree with this. Dallas, neither team is in a bad spot, though. So I think both teams are going to show up focused for this game. They both know they're facing a good opponent here. Dallas is coming off escaping St. Louis in overtime, which does mean it was a bigger effort game, at least. And Ottinger, having played a bunch of games in a row, it may be time that they actually rest him in this game, and you might get their inferior goalie here into Smith in this game, but we'll have to see. That might be the case in this game. So that would be a little bit of an edge to the Caps. The Caps, they're rolling this year, man. They have one of the best records in hockey, which is crazy. And they're starting a 2-game road trip here. So that usually tends to be a focus spot as well. And unfortunately, because I'm looking at, I got to look more into detail with these, man. I keep missing these. I'm like, I always focus on the dad trips in hockey, and those are always 2-game road trips. So I see a 2-game road trip. I'm usually like, okay, is this the dad trip? And I keep forgetting to do that. So I actually missed Washington's dad trip was actually here, the Florida trip, Florida and Tampa Bay, and they won both of those games. And they really stepped it up for that first game. But either way, the first game of a road trip, you're usually going to be focused, and they have momentum coming into this, and they're coming off some easy wins basically over some inferior opponents. So I think really that just gives them momentum coming into this game. They're not going to be in a letdown spot or anything like that. So I do think the Capitals have a little bit of the edge in that one. Florida, Edmonton, some might consider to be the biggest game. These are all good games, man. This is the Stanley Cup rematch, man, as these teams have not played since Florida almost blew a 3-0. They almost became the first team ever to blow a 3-0 playoff series lead in the NHL, and Edmonton forced a Game 7. And I think that was the first time a team down 0-3 had even forced Game 7, which is crazy. So Edmonton does have Stanley Cup final revenge in this game, which is a big motivator. So that might be the determining factor in this game. Edmonton down from -135 to -133, but they do have 57% of the cash, where it's 71% of the tickets are on Florida. The public's going to look at this and probably just remember what happened last year and think this might be a repeat of that. Although actually, hilariously, the Oilers have the better record than the Panthers this year, very slightly, with just one fewer loss. Very similar records. And Also, hilariously, the Panthers' road record is the same as the Oilers' home record. So the Panthers have actually been pretty decent on the road. I mean, that's pretty good for a road record. And that means it's not a very good home record for Edmonton. Oh, that almost sounded like I said home wrecker. Well, hopefully it's not going to be a home wrecker situation here. But Florida, they're coming off a couple of losses on this road trip, but it may be a difficult spot just because they are playing a fourth straight road game here, and they've really just had one day off in between each game. So it's not that easy. But then again, they're coming off a bad loss to Calgary, and they haven't scored a goal in 2 straight games. So Florida may be focused just because they want to bounce back from these embarrassing games. It will be Bobrovsky in net, I assume, because he got the day off in the last game against Calgary. Part of the reason they lost probably is because Knight was in there, although their offense didn't show up there. But we will probably get Florida's better goalie back here in Bobrovsky. And Edmonton is coming off a bigger win, couple of bigger wins. I mean, they beat Tampa, they crushed Minnesota, and then they beat Vegas 6-3. So that's what they're coming off of. So they're coming off a string of big games. And if they were playing a weaker opponent here, I'd be like, man, they're going to be in a letdown spot here. But there's not going to be a letdown spot when you're facing the team that beat you in the Stanley Cup Finals last year. So that's not going to be the case. But Edmonton, I mean, how long could they sustain this effort? I don't know. So I can't come in on the Edmonton side here, even though the revenge is a big factor. The scheduling spot doesn't look that great to me for Edmonton. So I'm not going to do it. There may be an opportunity to come in and play Boston. My Boston Bruins might catch Edmonton in a decent spot if Edmonton's coming off a tough game here against Florida. So we'll see. Colorado, Vancouver, maybe the least interesting of these three, but it's still a pretty good game. Colorado up from -124 to -135 on the road. So the odds makers are telling you Colorado's the better team here as they're laying a price on the road. Vancouver looks like a public home underdog. You almost never see that. You see public road underdogs sometimes. A public home underdog is a very, very rare situation. You see the line moving against that too. 88% of the tickets and 86% of the cash on Vancouver. So lots of the tickets and less of the cash. So strong market indicators on Colorado. So if I was going to play any of these games, I think Colorado is probably the best way to look here. I mean, the public's coming in and looking at this and looking at the records, I guess, and thinking, well, the Avs have a pretty ugly looking record. Well, part of it is because they have no overtime losses, which is kind of ridiculous. Every one of their games has been either a win or a regulation loss. I mean, that's crazy. They might be the only team in the league to have no overtime losses. So their record looks worse than Vancouver's does. Vancouver actually hasn't been good at home. They have more losses than wins at home, so that's not good. So Vancouver, not very impressive at home. My Bruins just slaughtered them at home, and I had money on the Bruins in that game. So a double whammy for me, or a double celebration for me in that game, I guess I should say. The opposite of a double whammy, because I did not take it on the chin in that one in either way, emotionally or with my money, although my money gets me emotional as well about these games. So I'm gay. I'm very emo. I'm the emo better, man. But yeah, I mean, the odds makers are telling you Colorado's actually the significantly better team here, man, even though the record doesn't look that way. So that is the only way that I would look in this game, even though I know Vancouver is coming off that loss I just mentioned, a bad, ugly loss to Boston. They were coming off shutting out Florida. So that was part of the reason why I played Boston there. And I also thought it was a sandwich spot because this is a big Western Conference game. So Vancouver, it is possible they're in a bounce back spot here, but I'm not going to try it. I mean, the market looks to be heavily indicative of Colorado here. In Colorado, I think they're in a good spot because they just got a pretty easy win over Nashville. They had one of their lesser goalies in net, Blackwood. They have Blackwood and Wedgwood as their goalies here. Blackwood, we know Blackwood has got to be big, but may have the worst numbers if that joke gets across. So Wedgwood is probably going to be back in net here for Colorado. And this one, although they've had Georgiev in net as well for a little while, so I don't know what it's going to be, but it won't be Blackwood in this game, I assume. So it'll be one of their other two goalies in this one, which is probably an advantage to Colorado. And Colorado, like I said, they're coming off a nice, easy win over Nashville, who, even though I think Nashville is not as bad as their record would tell you, they just really have not been playing well. They just continue to lose. So it's not an impressive win for Colorado, but what it does do is give them some momentum to take out on the road with them. And now they're starting a road trip. So when you start a road trip, as I always say, it's a focus spot, and they don't have bigger games up next on the road trip. So I like Colorado in that game overall. That is the only way I would look in that game. Nate, what's up, man? Thanks for hanging out, man. Again, as usual, you're always in my chat, man. I continue to appreciate it. Stars are the same with OT. Do they also have no overtime losses? I did not notice. Maybe that's the case. Let me see. Yeah, that's actually true. Wow, I didn't even notice that. I noticed it with Colorado just because this market read here had me looking like, wait a minute. Like, let me look at what the records look like here to see why the public is doing this here. But yeah, I mean, a rare situation with a public home underdog there. So definitely maybe a spot where you want to take Colorado. NBA, I mean, we do have a decent NBA slate here, but I don't even know if I want to. Are any of these games worthy of talking about? I mean, maybe Nuggets, Kings, I guess. I mean, the rest of these games are real ugly. I mean, this is really the only game that you could even consider to be good, I guess. Maybe Heat Pistons is actually not that bad. Detroit has been pretty competitive, but Nuggets, Kings is the one that drew my eye the most, just because you see the Nuggets are public with 83% of the tickets, but you see the Kings moving from pick 'em to pick 'em with juice. So the Kings are kind of moving towards being the favorite with 50% of the cash. So the market read looks to be the strongest on the Sacramento side. Denver, I mean, they still have that kind of air around them where it's like, I think the public just continues to think, well, Denver's going to have to start turning this around, right? They're not as bad as the record indicates. I don't disagree with that. I do think Denver is better than the record indicates. I mean, the odds makers are telling you Denver's the better of these two teams. Sacramento has a slightly worse record than Denver does this year, but Denver, they're coming into this game with momentum, so I don't want to fade Denver here, man, even though they did have an extra day off in here. I don't think that's really going to be a momentum stopper, just having one extra day off. This is the first game of a road trip, and they don't have bigger opponents up next. So Sacramento is actually the most difficult opponent on the road trip here. So I kind of expect Denver is going to show up in this game focused, man, because you want to get the road trip off on the right foot. You know that this is the better of these three opponents here. So I do expect Denver to show up here. So I'm not going to try to fade them in this game, even though the market does look indicative of doing that. Sacramento has had multiple days off or more days off. They've had 3 days off. And when you're kind of rolling like this, you have 3 wins in a row, although granted, they were not against the best teams. They were kind of against some of the worst teams in Utah and New Orleans. So New Orleans just can't get healthy. And San Antonio, I mean, they blew them out. So it's kind of an impressive road win there for them. Sacramento, coming off of all that, I mean, it is possible that maybe that extra day off is going to be a bit of a momentum stopper, maybe. But also maybe you could say, well, they kind of just escaped against a pretty bad injured New Orleans team. And maybe Sacramento was just kind of riding a high, coming off 2 monster blowout wins. I mean, you beat anybody by 50 points like they did against Utah there. You're probably going to feel a little bit high on yourselves, even if it was the worst team in the NBA or one of the worst teams in the NBA. So maybe they just didn't totally show up for that game against a very injury-plagued Pelicans team. So potentially they could also maybe be in a bounce back spot here. I mean, it's not like they're going to not be focused with Denver and Jokic coming into their house. So we will see what happens in that game. It's not going to be a game that I'm going to try to get involved in, though. Public is liking Demko being back for Vancouver. I don't really pay that much attention to the NHL personnel, to be honest. I only pay attention to who the starting goalies are, but maybe. And if that's the case, then it might be like a little bit of a reverse injured player spot. But the injured players in hockey, I think, mean a little bit less, but maybe like the public might overreact to it. So you might be right. Like if the public knows that there's like some star player coming back, they might overreact to that. And I don't know if the odds makers really would have to adjust for that. It doesn't look like they have. As you see, Colorado is still a pretty decent sized road favorite there. So the odds makers haven't really adjusted the line for it. And in hockey, you don't see huge adjustments when star players get injured and when they come back. Like, oh, he's the goalie. Is he? How am I that out of touch, man? I don't even know who Vancouver's goalies are, man. But okay, if he's back, then here's the thing about that. Then that could mean that it is kind of a reverse injured player spot then. So the goalie actually is a more important player. So if he is coming back, then it might take him a little while to get kind of back into like rhythm there. So that might actually be a negative for Vancouver as well, just in his first game back. So even if he is their best goalie, but I don't think it's impacting the line that much, though. That's the thing. Like if it was impacting the line, I think you would see Colorado not be as much of a favorite there. So I don't know. So that's tough to read, but that might be an extra edge to Colorado there, actually, because if Demko is coming back, again, like I said, he might have to get back in game shape there. So, and then we'll talk about Monday Night Football, which I did talk about these. We have a double header. I'm going to try to do this quick. I'm not playing these games. I mean, these are games I don't want to touch at all, especially the later of the two games is, oh God, this is ugly. I mean, these games do kind of have playoff implications for one of the two teams in each, but this is horrific, man. This is not a good Monday night slate. I already talked about these games on my NFL video where I didn't even do well as far as my leans, although I think my bets both should have gotten there and only one of the two. I already ranted about that shit. The fucking Colts, man. I cannot believe how that game went down. Just ridiculous. I mean, I'm sick of like basically handicapping games correctly and having like a huge statistical edge on the team that I'm on and not even covering as an underdog. It's just so bad. All right, Bears, Vikings. Vikings are up from 6 to 7. 7 with kind of reduced juice. Vikings are public. 85% of the tickets. They do have 89% of the cash coming in on them, though. But I don't know if that's actually accurate. I consider the Vikings just kind of be a bit of a square play in this game because the public's not going to want to have anything to do with Chicago. They've been losing bad for a while now. They're coming off a real ugly loss to San Francisco. But here's the thing. I mean, I mentioned this on my other show. Look at what they did before that, man. They played 3 divisional opponents, all 3 of them, including Minnesota, played all of them basically to the wire. And that Detroit game on Thanksgiving is what got Eberflus fired, Everflush. Because of that mistake in clock management at the end there. So they had 3 brutal one-score losses to all of the other teams in the division. Coming off of that and having to go to the Pacific Coast, that was a bad spot for them, even though I know I mentioned that I actually kind of leaned to Chicago just because I thought the fired coach might fire them up a little bit. But that was the reason I didn't play it was the scheduling spot was just not very good at all. So that was just bad. Chicago, I mean, they got absolutely annihilated in that game, but I do think it was a bad spot. I think maybe you'll see them still play with a little bit of a spark because the new coach is there. So, and because this is Monday night and it's a divisional game. And like I said in my other video, when you have a team that lost at home in the first divisional game, which is what happened with Chicago here, they lost at home. They tend to be a decent play on the road, getting a bunch of points. And that is what you get with Chicago here. So it's kind of that in-season road revenge, basically, where that divisional opponent lost at home to that team and they want to try to return the favor. And that tends to be a little bit of an extra motivator. So I do slightly lean to taking the points with the Bears here, but there's no way I can actually I do not want to do it. Both of these teams actually pressure the quarterback pretty decently. So that's going to be one thing coming into this game. So this game might actually wind up being lower scoring than what we think as well. As far as the side, Minnesota, the only thing might be that Minnesota might be focus here just because it is Monday night. They're hosting a Monday night game, so that might cause Minnesota to show up here. But also, I mean, they're still kind of fighting for playoff positioning, and because Green Bay won last night, maybe Minnesota still has motivation because of that too, because they want to stay ahead of Green Bay. So not everything indicates that Minnesota might overlook this game completely, but also this game against Chicago was pretty close. So maybe Minnesota will take Chicago seriously just because this game was close, but I don't know, because Minnesota was blowing them out in this game, and that was that crazy game where I think Chicago got an onside kick recovery and basically miraculously sent it into overtime and then still lost. Absolutely brutal for Chicago there, but I don't know. I don't know how Minnesota's going to take it because other than that, Minnesota was actually running away with that game. So I could see Minnesota thinking both ways about this game. The other thing I will say is that I think the under might make sense in this game because this first game was way high scoring with 57 points scored. And we're looking at a total up from 42.5 to 44 now. 71% of tickets, 78% of cash on the over. So it does look like money is coming in on the over, but I don't really agree with that. I think this is a misleading result here. When you had a 57-point result in the first game, the total comes out at 42.5 or whatever in this one. The odds makers are kind of telling you they're not buying what happened in this game, and I don't either. I mean, this game was 24-10 going into the fourth quarter, and then the floodgates opened. So, I mean, this was not actually really as high scoring a game as it looked. And you see at the end there, I mean, we had Chicago had a 40-yard drive, so they had a shortened field. They recovered an onside kick, scored again on a short field, sent it into overtime. You had short fields on the other side too. You had a 15-yard touchdown drive from Minnesota, so that was a short field. You had a 49-yard drive that only resulted in a field goal, though, for the Bears there. So maybe that one doesn't really matter. But, yeah, you had a couple of short drives in this game, man. So I think this game was a little bit higher scoring than it probably should have been. Although, yeah, the yardage totals are actually pretty high in this game. But still, I think the under might make sense in this one, man. And again, like I said, I mean, you're probably going to see pressure on both quarterbacks here. Minnesota's rushing attack actually has kind of faded a little bit recently, and their rushing attack might have some issues in this game. Or I think Chicago actually is probably a little bit better at stopping the run than the pass, if I remember correctly. So you may see the offense, both offenses may become a little bit one-dimensional because Chicago also cannot run the ball at all. So you may see Chicago struggle on offense here as well. So that's the way I look at that game. And then Atlanta and the Raiders, before I get out of here, the Falcons are up from 3.5 to 5.5 with juice. They're very public. Well, not as public as the Vikings, but 70% of tickets, 70% of the cash. But to me, it looks like legitimate money is coming in on the side of the Falcons. So it looks like we may have public and professional agreement on the Falcons in this one. So I would not try to fade the Falcons and try to take one of those somewhat appealing to professional bettors, Monday night home underdogs. Professional bettors, even me, I mean, I like Monday night home underdogs, but in this game, I do not. The Raiders, well, I'll talk about it in a second. Just finishing up talking about what the market looks like here. Total is up from 44 to 44.5, but juice to the under, so very slight move. 62% of tickets, 71% of the cash on the over. I don't know how to read the total on this one at all, man. I'm not even going to really offer an opinion on the total in this one, but my opinion on the side would actually be towards laying the points with the Falcons. But again, I really do not want to lay points on the road. And there are some things that make me hesitate a little bit. The reasons why I like the Falcons are that they're on a long loss streak right now. They're coming off that loss to Minnesota, which I should have mentioned when I talked about Minnesota. So actually, before I forget, before I actually transition to that game, even though I already did, sorry, no segue here. Minnesota, I mean, they're rolling right now, but they've beaten a lot of kind of inferior opponents in the stretch, man. I mean, Minnesota, but Chicago is, of course, one of those same opponents and is an inferior opponent as well. But I don't think these wins are really that impressive, and most of them are not blowouts. And then this game against Atlanta was not what it appeared. This was a 21-21 game in the fourth quarter, man. So then Atlanta really just kind of threw the game away. Like Kirk Cousins just kind of imploded against his former team, man. It was the Cousins Bowl. And as I'm going to point out in this game again as well, I pointed out on my last video, when you have a quarterback facing his former team, he's going to get up for it, but the defense knows all of his tendencies. So it actually, I think, is a bit of an advantage to the defense more than it is a motivational advantage for the quarterback. And Minnesota does have Seattle, Green Bay, and Detroit up next. So this is the least of the opponents left on Minnesota's schedule. So we'll see how that goes. Atlanta, on the other side of that, they're coming off that blowout loss to Minnesota. They lost 4 games in a row. So this does look bad, but they actually outplayed the Chargers. As I mentioned, I lost money on that one. They dominated the Chargers in that game, and it was just Kirk Cousins can't get right. 4 interceptions and a pick 6, just awful. And then this game was not what it appeared. As I said, it was 21-21 late in the game. So Atlanta is in a bounce back spot, and they need to somehow get back in the division here, man. So Atlanta does need to show up because they're still trying to fight against Tampa Bay and New Orleans, really, to try to win this division because that's the only way they're going to make the playoffs. So they need to show up. So they're the only one of these teams that really has playoff motivation, obviously, here. But one issue is that Atlanta is going to the Pacific Coast for a late game here. And I always say East Coast teams playing a late night game on the Pacific Coast, it's not a great biological clock standpoint there. But they were just out in Minnesota. But then again, it is also a second straight road game. So that makes it kind of a difficult spot for the Falcons as well. On the Raiders side, I mean, they're just playing out the stretch. So they really don't have a whole lot of reason to show up for the rest of these games, except that maybe because it's a Monday night game and it's a nationally televised game, that might be one reason why they might show up for it, because they're hosting a Monday night game. So when you have these dead teams, the games they tend to show up for are division rivalries and Monday night games, and they might show up, or primetime games, I should say. They might show up just because this is a primetime game. But then you're looking at a Vegas team that you don't know what you're going to get here, man. I mean, half their defense is injured. We just found out that Max Crosby is done for the season. He's having season-ending surgery. He is obviously their best defensive player. He's a lunatic out there. So the Raiders are really, I think, in trouble on defense here. So I think Atlanta might actually have a decent bounce back here and a decent offensive performance once here against a Raiders D that's very beat up right now. That would be my opinion here. And then we don't know who the Raiders quarterback is either, because Aiden O'Connell is questionable, but I don't even think he's practiced yet this week. So he might not play. And if he doesn't play, it's going to be Desmond Ridder, who is not very good. I don't think there's a huge drop off there. I mean, both those quarterbacks suck. So I don't think it really matters which quarterback is in there, but Desmond Ridder will be facing his former team. So just like I said with Kirk Cousins, he might get up for that game. He might be a little bit motivated to face his former team. But on the other hand, Atlanta just had him on their team, so they know how to defend against, and they know his tendencies. And I think when it's one guy, even though he is the quarterback, that's a big, important position there. But I think versus an entire defense, knowing what to do against him, I think the defense actually has the edge in that standpoint there. So, yeah, the Desmond Ridder revenge game. So those are all my thoughts on that, man. I mean, lean to the Falcons slightly, but I don't want to lay points like that in that spot, having to go to the Pacific Coast. So that's it. That's going to do it for me. My one actual play is the Middle Tennessee State Blue Raiders. Is that who they are? So the other Raiders in college basketball, -4 or -4.5, whatever's out there. That's going to do it. Nate, thanks for hanging out, man. As always, I'm Tower Gang Toad. You can follow me on Twitter and subscribe to the Patreon for the Tower Gang Podcast. Go follow us, the Tower Gang Podcast, the most offensive podcast ever. Patreon.com/Tower Gang. You get live pre-show, post-show. We're just starting to transition over. I'm starting to get the video up on the Patreon Spotify feed finally. Like, I'm trying to back catalog all the video there to get the video up there for you Patreons. So hopefully that will not take a whole long time. The video's up for the most recent episode now. So hopefully I continue with that, and hopefully that doesn't take that long. That's going to do it for me. Again, man, let's have a good one, and Tower Gang forever, man. Peace out.